And suddenly, while he's in his cabin room, he gets a knock on the door, and it's not anyone from the boat, it's Border Patrol. Hi, attorney Scott Simmons, a partner attorney here at the Rawson Law Firm, criminal defense and DUI attorney. Here to talk about a huge drug trafficking case that we got entirely dismissed. This case is a little bit unusual for most drug trafficking cases. So typically for a drug trafficking case, you see it either start with a search warrant into a house or a traffic stop, and the car gets searched for different reasons, and that's where they find the drugs. Well, this case occurred on a cruise ship, on one of the largest cruise industries in the world. Our client was entering through the Fort Lauderdale port. He got his bags on the boat. He made it on the boat himself. And suddenly, while he's in his cabin room, he gets a knock on the door, and it's not anyone from the boat, it's Border Patrol. Border Patrol comes into his room. They start grabbing all of his bags, opening it up, and they start cutting into things. And he had like these Pedialyte packets, and the Pedialyte was filled with illegal powder. Client is then arrested and taken to Broward County Jail. He's arrested on multiple felony counts, including drug trafficking of cocaine, GHB, ketamine, and MDMA. So he's facing 4 different counts. Luckily, his friends on the cruise decide, hey, our friend's in trouble. We need to start hiring a lawyer. They call us right away. We go and we appear at first appearance court for him. And we were able to negotiate a really good bond to get him out of custody. Because all of his friends were on the cruise, it was hard. We had to find other people to help him post a bond. Well, we got him out. He spent less than 24 hours in jail for those serious drug trafficking charges. But then that's when our work really started. Our client came out. He met with us, and we started the strategy session with him to really talk about the facts of the case, because it didn't sound like a great case at first. So, well, they found the drugs in your room. Well, for a good, trained, experienced criminal defense attorney, well, why? Why did they find the drugs in your room? How did they know that there would be drugs in your room? How did they get into your room? What caused them to go into your room? Those are the main questions we have to see if there's motions to suppress. The next question we have is, well, on this bag, how many people touched this bag? Because as we know, is this a bag that he brought on the boat and then threw into his room? Well, then it would really only be him. Or is this a bag that he left down with the porters? The porters then brought it on the boat. It went through the x-ray, then went through the other multiple people that touched it, and then it ended up at his door. And it really ended up in that second option. And why that was important is chain of custody. And we had a lot of legal defenses in this case, but the chain of custody was the main reason I believe that the state attorney did the right thing and dismissed this case, which was they did not have video on that bag for the entire time our client didn't have it. We actually worked really hard in this case. We filed multiple motions to subpoena that cruise ship line to get all the surveillance video. So because we wanted it. We wanted to prove, hey, this bag was touched by 25 different people in 3 hours while our client didn't have access to the bag. There's no way you can put this bag on him. There's other issues that happened with the case of, was it really our client's bag or was it another person's bag? But we didn't even have to get into that with the prosecutor. We were able to show the prosecutor that chain of custody issue, and then there was also an issue with the search. So as I was discussing, why did they come in and search? So entering a cruise ship is a border. So there's different rules for border searches versus non-border. We have less reasonable expectation of privacy, meaning we have less rights at the border. That's why when you go onto an airplane, TSA, they can search all of your stuff. When you go on these cruise ships, they can do a routine border check, meaning they can routinely check your bags, your luggage, anything they want, as long as it's within the policies and procedures. What happened here, though, the going into his room and ripping up all his bags, that's not a routine search. So in order to do that extra search, you need to have some sort of proof. The courts differ on whether or not it's reasonable suspicion or probable cause, but either way, you need to have something more than a mere hunch in order to get into that room. The other argument we had that was also successful to the prosecutor was there wasn't anything else. There maybe was an anonymous tip. It was unclear if it was corroborated by any other evidence, but they really had no reason to believe that our client was bringing on contraband onto this boat that allowed them to enter his room. You know, when we're talking about the Fourth Amendment, we talk about reasonableness. That you need to have some type of proof before you just violate people's rights. They didn't have any in this case. So we had the chain of custody issues, and then we also had the Fourth Amendment issues. And we coupled both of those together right after the case got filed, and the prosecutor did the right thing in this case, dismissed all of the charges. So every single charge was dismissed. We didn't even resolve it to a third-degree felony or a misdemeanor. Dismissed. Our client is expunging his record now like this never existed, and he's going to go back to living his best future because he hired us. We saw the legal issues in this case and we acted fast. Other defense attorneys wouldn't have gone and subpoenaed the cruise ship to get the surveillance videos, but we got it. We went through it all. We tracked every single place he went on that cruise before he got arrested. And we were able to have that evidence in case we had to go to a trial or in case we had to actually argue those motions to suppress in front of the judge. So that way we could put forward the best argument possible. So the difference between drug trafficking and drug possession is amount. So each different drug under the statute has an amount. That means once you hit that threshold, it now becomes a more serious charge. You also have an in-between of, so let's do cannabis, for example. So you have misdemeanor possession of marijuana under 20 grams, possession of marijuana over 20 grams, and then you can have possession of marijuana with intent to sell and distribute. That's also a third-degree felony. And then you could have trafficking in marijuana, which becomes that first-degree felony. But even for cocaine, you have possession of cocaine, which is a third-degree felony. Then you have delivery of cocaine, which is a second-degree felony. And then based on amount, you can have trafficking in cocaine. And remember, for trafficking in cocaine, they don't need to prove that you were trying to be a drug dealer. They don't need to prove that you were trying to sell or distribute the drugs. All it is based off the amount. There's only two ways to expunge your record in a drug trafficking case. One is to get a not guilty verdict at trial. The second is to get the case dismissed by the prosecutors. I would say we don't see a lot of drug trafficking cases with cruise ships. We have actually been getting more cruise ship cases, but drug trafficking, no, we don't see a lot of drug trafficking cases, especially at the state level. This case was interesting. The name of the DEA operation was Operation Pineapple Express, which is hilarious if you know the movie. And they basically, I'm pretty sure the federal agents saw all the issues with the case and they said, we're not taking this, we're going to dump it. We'll let the state figure it out. And they realized that it wasn't a good case and they couldn't go forward on it. But typically you're going to see drug trafficking like this, where you're at a border, it's going to go federal rather than going state. So yeah, we've had a lot of success in drug trafficking here at the Rawson Law Firm. Another case that was dismissed, no information, no charges filed. Client would be eligible to expunge, but he wasn't a citizen. It saved his life though, because he was going to get deported and he had family in this country. He was raising his little girl. Client was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Client was in a car with other people, didn't really know them, friends of friends of friends. Car ends up getting pulled over because of an anonymous 911 call that car was about to do a drug deal. Everybody in that car gets arrested. Our client gets charged with trafficking within a school zone because the house that they were going to was just within a certain yardage of a school. The normal trafficking charges with this case, but then there was also an enhancement because it was within a school zone. So if you're accused of committing a drug trafficking or a drug sale within a school zone, they add an extra enhancement. And what we see is, one, oftentimes police officers aren't good at math and they don't know the distance between where a house is and where a school is. The other thing we see is the statutory intent is not really met, because if a school is here and the house is here, but there's a bunch of things in between it, it's not a straight line. We shouldn't be measuring it based off a straight line, but based off streets, because that's the purpose of the intent. Is how close are you actually to the school that you are dealing, to schools, which is the point of the enhancement. And we see that officers are kind of abusing it by just doing a straight line instead of by going by an actual like Google Maps or GPS maps. But he had that enhancement on it. We got the case in pre-filing right after he was arrested and bonded out. He called us up. We talked about the case. There was lots of different defenses that we were able to do. We reached out to the state attorney's office. We told them, hey, look, our client's wrong place, wrong time. You can't prove anything other than wrong place, wrong time. It wasn't his phone being called for the deal. He was in the back seat. Nothing was on his person. You should decline the charges in this case. Ultimately, we got a reasonable state attorney who was willing to listen to us in the pre-filing stage and willing to do the right thing, dismissed all the charges for him. Very important for him, as he was not a U.S. citizen. He was here. He was most likely going to get deported with any plea that he was going to take in a case like this. So luckily, he even got out of jail. So sometimes we see with people who aren't citizens, especially if you're here illegally, an immigration hold. And what an immigration hold is that's a hold that's put on by ICE to basically make it harder or impossible for you to get out of custody. So even after you post the bond on your case, ICE then has the opportunity to decide if they're going to pick you up or not pick you up. If they pick you up, you then have to go to immigration court. You need to hire an immigration attorney, which we at Rawson Law Firm, we know multiple different immigration attorneys that do represent people for that hearing, and you have to get a separate immigration bond. So it's an entirely separate process that people have to go through, and the consequences are completely different. So when you're dealing with consequences in the criminal court, that's one thing, but then the immigration consequences could be more severe. You could beat the criminal case, and the immigration, there's no difference, and you're still possibly getting deported if you don't have the right counsel. Best advice I can give anyone facing a drug trafficking charge is the best advice that I give anyone who's being interrogated by police or questioned by police or questioned in any way, shape, or form by law enforcement. Shut the fuck up. You have a Fifth Amendment right. Your Fifth Amendment right allows you to remain silent and allows you the right to have an attorney present at questioning. There's a reason you have these rights. There's a reason why officers don't want you to invoke these rights. These rights are there to protect you. If you speak, you may think you're able to outsmart the cop, but sometimes you're not. It's better to remain silent and cooperate. And people think they're the same thing, and they're not the same thing. So remaining silent doesn't mean you're not cooperating with law enforcement. Cooperating with law enforcement is following commands. So officer asks you to get out of your car, you get out of your car. Officer asks you where you're coming from or where you're going, you don't have to discuss your day with them. You're officer, I'm not going to get in your way. Do what you need to do. I'm not answering any of your questions at this time. There's a difference. There's a big difference. You don't challenge the search of your vehicle with the officer right then and there. You don't consent. You definitely don't consent, but you don't challenge it there. You challenge it in the courtroom. And by clearly and unequivocally invoking your Fifth Amendment rights, saying, officer, I am not answering any questions. I'm not consenting to any searches. I'm asking for an attorney. It's the best thing you can do for us to make sure that we can file the appropriate motions to say you unequivocally invoked your rights. When you're wishy-washy and you don't clearly state that you're invoking your rights, that's when the government is able to say, well, he didn't invoke his rights. Like your right to remain silent, for example. You can't just sit there and be quiet for 5 hours and you invoked your rights to remain silent even though you were silent for 5 hours. You have to unequivocally state to law enforcement, I am invoking my right to remain silent, and then they will cease questioning you. Or if they don't, then we have a motion to suppress any statements after that fact. For anyone looking for any representation for any drug charges, possession charges, drug trafficking charges, please give us a call at the Rawson Law Firm so we can give you a strategy session, tell you how we can help you out. You can call us at 754-206-6200.